Hey guys, it's Libby, and today I'm going to be showing you the books I got this holiday season. I say holiday season because it's not just Christmas, it's also my birthday. I turned 26 on December 21st. I'm old. I got quite a diverse bunch. There's going to be some fiction, some non-fiction, some poetry, a little bit for everybody. So the first thing I got was a present from my grandmama. It is called Lesley Castle by Jane Austen. It's called Lesley Castle, but it's actually a collection of 3 different works of Jane Austen's juvenilia. They are Lesley Castle, The History of England, and Katherine or the Bower. I have taken a little sneak peek inside, and like from the 5 sentences I've read, I think I like this better than Jane Austen's actual work. Not her actual work, because this is real, her adult work. This is a little bit more overdone, but it's also a lot more self-aware. Also, there's this great thing about the history of England, which is just, you know, a history mainly of English kings. Her sister Cassandra drew little portraits of the kings and queens of England to go with this, but she drew them like in late 18th century dress. So here's Henry IV with like a low wig and frock coat and cravats. That's not what they were wearing in 1399, but it is adorable. So, as usual, I will be reading you the first sentence. Since these are 3 distinct works, I think I will read you the first sentence of all 3 of them. Lesley Castle, we start with, "My brother has just left us." The History of England, we start with, "Henry IV ascended the throne of England much to his own satisfaction in the year 1399, after having prevailed on his cousin and predecessor Richard II to resign it to him, and to retire for the rest of his life to Pomfret Castle, where he happened to be murdered." You see what I'm saying about the self-awareness? And the first sentence of Katherine. "Katherine had the misfortune, as many heroines have had before her, of losing her parents when she was very young, and of being brought up under the care of a maiden aunt, who, while she tenderly loved her, watched over her conduct with so scrutinizing a severity as to make it very doubtful to many people, and to Katherine amongst the rest, whether she loved her or not." The next one is something I am very excited about. I specifically asked for it. It is Shakesqueer, edited by Madhavi Menon. This is subtitled A Queer Companion to the Complete Works of William Shakespeare, and they are not kidding when they say complete works. It does include the poetry and the sonnets, and also some of the more recently attributed works like Thomas More, and also there is apparently, in the table of contents, an essay on the play Love's Labour's Won, which is difficult to write an essay on because that play is either lost or an alternate title for something like Much Ado About Nothing. But anyway, the story behind this text is that it is a collection of essays on Shakespeare and queer theory written by queer theorists who know something about Shakespeare rather than Shakespeare scholars who know something about queer theory. Because Madhavi Menon's argument is that normally we consider queer scholarship and queer studies to have begun in the 19th century, because that's when our modern conceptions of homosexual and heterosexual had developed. Before then, like, those weren't really concepts people had. And so the works of Shakespeare have never been read as foundational to queer theory. They have been read as old texts to which one can apply modern queer theory, but this collection is about looking at how the works of Shakespeare can be used as foundational texts in queer theory, which is great. I am going to read you the first sentence of the introduction, but I'm not going to read you the first sentence of every thing in here because there's 48 chapters and that would take a long time, but I will go through the table of contents and read you some of the choicest titles of the chapters. Some people didn't really enter into the whole spirit of things, and they titled their things like The Deep Structure of Sexuality, War, and Masochism in Henry IV Part 2, which is no fun, but some people did do some fun titles. So we've got All's Well That Ends Well, or Is Marriage Always Already Heterosexual? Cymbeline, Desire, Vomit, Emptiness, Cymbeline's Marriage Time. I don't remember any vomit in Cymbeline. Henry VI Part 1, Wounded Alpha Bad Boy Soldier. Henry VI Part 2, The Gayest Play Ever. I don't think that's true. A Midsummer Night's Dream, Shakespeare's Ass Play. Richard III, Fuck the Disabled, the prequel. Twelfth Night, Is there an audience for my play? So the first sentence of the introduction by Madhavi Menon is, When I first decided to title the introduction to this volume Queer Shakes, a friend pointed out that Queer Shakes sounds a bit like a libertine's pathology. And the last book that I got for my birthday, if you thought we were going to stop talking about sex, you're wrong, because it's Lady Chatterley's Lover. I was given this by my husband, and I don't totally know how to take that. There's a very short list of people from whom it is not weird to receive a copy of Lady Chatterley's Lover. In fact, it may only be appropriate to buy it for yourself, but nonetheless, I have it now. This was written by D.H. Lawrence in the 1920s, and it is famous because it is so very, very dirty. Lawrence was an Englishman, but he was not able to get this book published in England. He had to find like a small Italian press in order to publish it, and then it was sort of smuggled back into England. However, D.H. Lawrence would like me to tell you that this book is not dirty. It is very frank sexually, and it uses words like fuck and cunt a lot. But D.H. Lawrence asserts that sex is not a dirty act, it is a clean act, and so the words that are used to describe it are also clean. So what's going on in this book is it's set either during or shortly after World War I. We have Lord and Lady Chatterley, Clifford and Constance, I think their names are. And Clifford was injured in World War I, and he is now paralyzed below the waist, which means he's impotent. So he tells his wife that if she wants to have sex with other men, that's okay. Connie goes and starts a relationship with the gamekeeper on their estate, and then we get lots of specific descriptions of the sex that they have. But we also see Connie start to realize that maybe the materialism of the life she has with her husband is not like really personally fulfilling, and that like interpersonal relationships, that's the stuff that matters, yo. Also, I gotta say that between this book and Maurice, early 20th century gamekeepers were getting some. There's all these like sexually repressed gentry out there ready to be swept off their feet by your rustic accents. It was the job to have. Anyway, let's read the first sentence. Chapter 1. Ours is essentially a tragic age, so we refuse to take it tragically. That's a really good first sentence. Oh. Lady Chatterley's Lover. Okay, now moving on to the books I got for Christmas. The first one is from my brother and sister-in-law and my nieces. Thanks, Steve, Shelby, Claudia, and Emily. This is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I heard about this from Elizabeth at Books and Pieces. She's a big fan of this book. I basically only know about it what she has said. I feel like there's not a whole lot of plot going on. It's mainly, you're focused on the small interpersonal relations between a bunch of people on a spaceship who are going a long way to a small angry planet. And this is perfect timing because this is the first book in a trilogy, the second book is already out, and the third book is, I believe, coming out very shortly, so I will not have to wait. The first sentence is, as she woke up in the pod, she remembered 3 things. Next we have some non-fiction, which is a bit weird for me. This is Talking Back, Talking Black by John McWhorter. I did specifically ask for this one. Normally I don't read a lot of non-fiction, and I think all of the non-fiction I own is biography of 19th century writers, so this is really outside of what I normally do. But I know John McWhorter from a podcast that he has at slate.com. It's called Lexicon Valley. John McWhorter is a professor at American University where he teaches like American studies and music theory and linguistics. And I really love his podcast. And I knew he'd written several books. He's got like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, a bunch out. And I was always like, oh, that's cool, he's written some books. I don't really read nonfiction though, so, But then I was like, Libby, you really love this podcast. You could have more sociolinguistics with John McWhorter. Get his books! I'm not totally sure, because I haven't read the book yet, but I think it looks at it both from a, like, syntactical, grammatical, phonological angle, like what makes Black English different from just Southern American English, and it also looks at it from a sociolinguistic angle about like how Black English is perceived. And I don't know if he talks about this in this book, but I know he's talked about it on the podcast, how a lot of innovations in standard American English originate in Black English. So like modern millennial speak is highly influenced by Black English. Very pleased to have this. Let's take a look at the first sentence. I'm going to give you the first sentence of the introduction, since this is nonfiction, so the introduction is more integrated into it than in a work of fiction. In Haiti, the language of print, school, and the media is French, but when speaking outside of formal settings, people use another form of speech, Haitian Creole. And then this is my last Christmas book. We're coming around to that poetry I mentioned. It is the Penguin Classics Complete John Donne. Y'all, I'm about to geek the heck out because John Donne is one of my favorite poets. He was writing in the late 16th, early 17th century, and his life story is just the most amazing, sappy pile of bananas, and I don't know how he doesn't have a biopic made about his life yet. Or does he? Please tell me, I want to watch it. John Donne started out life as a bit of a playboy. All of his early poems are like inventive ways of convincing women to have sex with him. But then John Donne met the woman who was to be his wife, and he fell completely in love with her, and you get this total change in his poetry, and it becomes like practically Petrarchan. That's a band name for you. And he talks about like how beautiful she is and how much he loves her, and it's so, I'm a big pile of feels. But then it gets better. She dies. I feel bad for saying that sentence. Then it gets better. She dies. Yeah, so they had lots of children, but they always lived in a really tiny house because he couldn't afford anything better. And he was really sad when she died, and then he became super religious. And I'm not Christian, and I actually don't really like Christianity, but I really like John Donne's religious poetry. It's not fair. I don't like that I like it, but I really like John Donne's later religious poetry. If you want to get a sort of taste of the 3 stages of John Donne, you can definitely find these poems online. They're in the public domain. I would look up The Flea, which is getting a lady to have sex with him, A Valediction Forbidding Mourning, which is about how much he loved his wife, and then for the religious one, you should read Divine Meditation number 4. Okay, so I'm gonna read the first sentence. This is a poem, so that we might be here for a while. I'm just gonna go till I get to a period. This is from Air and Angels. We don't actually have a very good chronology for John Donne's poetry, so this one has organized them by type and then by alphabetically. Okay. Twice or thrice had I loved thee before I knew thy face or name, so in a voice, so in a shapeless flame. Angels affect us oft and worshipped be, still when to where thou wert I came, some lovely glorious nothing I did see. But since my soul, whose child's love is, takes limbs of flesh and else could nothing do, more subtle than the parent is, love must not be, but take a body too. And therefore what thou wert and who I bid love ask, and now that it assume thy body I allow, and fix itself in thy lip, eye, and brow. Now we're moving on to the books that I bought with my Christmas money. So first one, I'm sure you guys don't need me to tell you about this. It is The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night by BookTube's own Jen Campbell. I really like Jen's videos about fairy tales and fairy tale history, and this is a kind of fairy tale influenced short story collection. I don't know that much about it, and I don't want to. Because fairy tales have been so foundational to our modern culture, it's very rare to experience a totally new fairy tale, and so I don't want to spoil myself in any way. But I will read you the first sentence of the first story, which is called Animals. These days, you can find anything you need at the click of a button. Oh my god, I have to read the second sentence to you. I have to. That's why I bought her heart online. Okay, the next 2 books I got to soothe my Maurice hangover. You guys know that I read Maurice a couple, like, was it only a month ago? How long ago was it? It seems so long ago, and yet also so recently. Maurice by E.M. Forster. Go read it. Okay, so I needed to get some more books in that vein. So the first one I got is another E.M. Forster. It is A Room with a View. And I didn't like super love the film, and so I was like, I guess E.M. Forster's just not for me. But then I read Maurice and it was so great, so like I have to read more E.M. Forster now. I'm a little bit worried though that like Maurice is his masterpiece because he didn't publish it until after he was dead, meaning he had several meaningful revisions throughout his life, whereas this book he just wrote it and then published it. So it had less time to become perfect. So this is a pretty stereotypical Edwardian comedy of manners. Our main character, her name is Lucy Honeychurch. She and like a cousin or something go on a trip to Italy. Italy, that land of romance. And they meet a father and son who are also English, staying at their same hotel, and she falls in love with the son, and then she goes home and gets engaged to some stuffy English man. And then she realizes that, like, passion and stuff. Yeah, good old conflict between love and financial security. We, as a species, apparently never get tired of this story, so here it is. I trust E.M. Forster to do a good job with it. The first sentence, which I think is quite famous, is, "The Signora had no business to do it," said Miss Bartlett. "No business at all." And the next one is not by E.M. Forster, but it is some more 20th century queer fiction. It is Carole by Patricia Highsmith. This was originally published in 1952 under the title The Price of Salt, and I think it was also published with a pseudonym because it's about lesbians, and it was 1952, and Patricia Highsmith wanted to continue to have a career. This was recently adapted to film starring Cate Blanchett and Rooney Mara. And I know that the film is called Carole. I don't know if the book, if like people are now publishing this under the title Carole to get the sales from people who watched the movie, or if the book title changed earlier. But you might find this under various titles and authorships. So this is set in the 1950s, and our main character is a young woman named Therese. She works in a department store, and one day this beautiful woman comes in named Carole, and they fall in love. Carole is married to a man, but she's in the middle of a divorce. But the problem is that the main problem with the divorce is a custody battle over their daughter. And so if the lawyers involved find out that Carole is in a gay relationship, she could lose custody of her daughter, and that's where all the sadness and intrigue comes from. Why does queer lit always have to be sad? It's because people were very mean for a very long time. Okay, first sentence. The lunch hour in the co-workers' cafeteria at Frankenberg's had reached its peak. Okay, last one. I didn't think about it, but this is actually also related to Maurice in that it's 19 teens and it's written by a gay man. So this is a very pretty collection, fabric covered, of, I believe it's a complete works of Wilfred Owen, who is my favorite poet of the modern era, if you define the modern era as starting after the French Revolution. Wilfred Owen is my favorite of the World War I poets, and World War I poetry is my favorite sort of genre of poetry in the modern era. As I talked about with John Donne, I really like 17th century poetry, and then I feel like through the 18th and 19th century, poetry was kind of on the decline as a medium, as the novel sort of started to take over, and as people got better and better at writing novels. But then there was like a late surge for poetry with the World War I poets. I think it's because you had a lot of educated young men who sort of knew about poetic conventions put into this really harrowing experience. And so then some people just naturally have the talent for poetry. And when you take this massive cohort, some of the people in that cohort will have an aptitude for poetry, and then they also have the technical skills that they learned in school and the sort of emotional, oh god, what do I want to say, clay out of which to mold really good poetry. It's not fun though. Why did I choose to end the video on this book? It's a lot about people dying. Studied the works of Wilfred Owen in school. We only read 4 of his poems, but we read them fairly intensely. They were SIW, Dulce et Decorum Est, Disabled, and Anthem for Doomed Youth, which are all quite good if you want a little taste of Wilfred Owen. And I actually had like a really intense experience with the poem Disabled, so we are now like kind of bonded because I went to an international baccalaureate school, which is like AP but European and more evil. So one of the exams that you have is your teacher selects 15 passages from all the works you've studied all year, and you walk into a room by yourself with 15 folders, closed folders, and you don't know what's in them, and you randomly pick one, and that's the passage that you have 10 minutes to take notes on it, and then you have to talk to your teacher about it for 15 minutes. And it is incredibly nerve-wracking. And the passage I got was Disabled by Wilfred Owen. So I was like, okay, you and me, Wilfred, we're gonna get through this exam. I'll read you the first sentence of, I think the first poem is The Unreturning. It's not quite as long as the first sentence of the John Donne one. Suddenly, night crushed out the day and hurled her remnants over cloud peaks, thunder-walled. Okay, sorry to end it on a bummer, guys. Thanks for watching. See you with another video soon.